Proportional Response. Book 1, Chapter 23, Part 8. The Trouble with Birds. Hannibal sat back as Henry's words rang in his ears. 2 more years. 2 more years of this war of fighting and death. And the only alternative is to try and fight more, with more death, but in less time. Either way is terrible, but I don't know how we can. Balud interrupted Hannibal's thoughts, his deep croak-like voice resonating confusion and irritation.
But, Henry, this can't go on for that long. All of the neutral parties in the council are tired of the war already, and talking about trying to find a way to intervene and force a peace. The populations of those of us who have joined you are growing more war-weary by the day as well.
Galen stepped in.
We, as in humanity and allies, enjoy a great deal of popularity at the moment with the various populations of the League, because we are seen as a shield against the Exaltans and a stick to curb their excess. At the same time, the Exaltans are still viewed with a great deal of both fear and respect. They, for better or worse, steered this council for centuries and have managed to provide a lot of both stability and prosperity. Our popularity comes because the Exaltans have always exacted a high price for what they provide, a price that many have felt for a long time was far too high. However, people are fickle. Already the memory of Sultan excess starts to fade, thanks in no small part to Isoltan, Pinigra, and other allies of theirs with whisper campaigns, and nostalgia begins to set in. Furthermore, the Exaltans are likely to go on the offensive again soon. The remote detonators have been removed from most of their fleet, and
Henry shook his head and held up a hand.
And the Allied military is quite ready to punish them severely if they try to launch any serious offensive. I can tell you now what the military has been up to the last few months, while the Exalted military has been effectively crippled.
Balud gave an annoyed croak.
Finally, my government has not shared your confidence that the Exalted military would not send out ships which had been freed before they finished disarming all of the bomb.
Hannibal shook his head and decided to answer for his brother, to save the man from having to repeat himself.
They know all too well that humanity would blow every last Zoltan ship that still carried a remote detonator. That has been evident since the first of their fleets was refitted and has been reinforced with every minute where they keep their ships within their own borders.
Henry shot him a grateful glance and continued.
I know that all of you have been worried by the apparent absence of our own military ships, but they have been very busy. Before we get to that, however, I have some questions regarding the Penigra. My intel boys and I have studied every action they have taken in the Council since the League's inception, though I will admit they dropped the ball pretty hard regarding these point-of-order token things.
Euro squeezed Hannibal's hand. He realized she seemed to be looking for a little support and squeezed back as she cut in.
To be fair, so did I, and so did my intel team. We had a discussion months ago about the entire kerfuffle that happened with them back at the League's founding. In a way, it was the first major crisis of the Council. You see,
Hannibal felt Euro's hand warm under his at her blush as everyone cocked an eyebrow at her, or made an equivalent expression as she muttered the forbidden words.
Well, I guess the details aren't important now. Suffice it to say that there was a lot of use of those things, and anyone just reading through the history would get the impression that they had all been used.
Henry shook his head.
That gets to the heart of my questions. Thank you, Euro. If the Penigra have been holding those things in reserve for all these centuries, why are they suddenly willing to burn them now, and in favor of the Zoltans, whom they don't particularly like?
Ingthal spoke with acid in his voice.
Because the Penigra believe in the status quo, with almost as much zeal as they believe in their dust-forsaken hierarchy and monarchy.
Balud waved a webbed hand and shot a slightly amused smile at Ingthal.
That is a part of it, yes, but it goes deeper. The Penigra do not care about the League, and they never have. My kind made something of a study of them when we realized the Exaltans planned to eradicate us. We hoped to find an ally, or at least have someone we could appeal to for aid. What we found is that they consider the lot of us as barely sapient barbarians, unworthy of their time nor attention, and that they helped form this League because they wanted a means to keep us all at bay without having to fight. Their point of view is all tied up in their belief about hierarchy and their caste system. They believe, with religious intensity unmatched in even the most dogmatic of any actual religion I've ever studied, that a strong caste system is the natural order of any advanced society, and any society lacking that is a primitive backwater with which they shouldn't pollute their own.
Hannibal felt himself frown at the declarations, but Henry beat him to the question.
Wait, if they are so rigid and so fond of monarchy, why would they favor the Sultan over the Venter? Because the Sultan, at least their leadership, do not believe in the concept of upward mobility, and their society operates the closest to the Penigra's rigid class system of any of us. You all know that there are less than a half dozen exaltants who manage to get elevated to voting status in any given year. What most don't understand, however, is that such elevations are usually the result of 2 or 3 generations of concerted effort. If a sultan gets elevated, it is because their grandparents positioned themselves in a spot which allowed their parents to position themselves in a place where they could position their offspring to gain rights. All these sultans running around thinking they will get elevated on their own merits? 4. They are grist for the mill, pawns the voters use to throw at one another or the rest of us. But I am starting to stray off topic. To bring it back, for the Penigra, it takes a minimum of 5 generations of the same sort of thing, though the average, not the extreme, the average is 10. And one slip by any member of those generations can reset the entire family.
Balud's eyes moved in the odd pattern which was the Arabso equivalent of a head shake.
Their caste system has become so ingrained at this point that there are traceable genetic differences between the castes, to the point that some diseases are only problems for certain castes.
Balud did the head shake movement again.
Everyone is still trying to move up, but to move up requires unceasing attention by the entire family. You can be about to ascend after 15 generations of toil and have it all spoiled because a cousin got overexcited and addressed a superior as an equal. They have entire libraries of study as to how this sort of system is the natural social evolution and the only way to provide a stable, safe society. I read through volumes and volumes of it, biggest circle-jerk academic bogwater I ever saw.
Hannibal found himself fascinated by the intricacies being laid out before him, though he could see others becoming impatient. Balud seemed to notice as well, because he waved a hand and spoke in crisp tones.
I give you all this background so you will understand the depths of the Penigra's contempt for us. That they believe we are primitives who will come around to their way of doing things in time. They would probably cut themselves off from the council and close their borders entirely, but they do occasionally learn, and they learned well from the tales of societies who did just that and were conquered by barbarians whom they could have stopped if they'd seen them coming. So, no, the Penigra don't care about us, about the League, or even the Exaltan. They just consider the Altan the least primitive among us, and have deals with the Altan to make sure that the rest of us don't disturb them too much. Of course, we could try to disturb them in response to their interference in the League, but
Ingthol cut in.
They would probably respond violently, possibly by entering the war directly on the side of the Exaltan. Henry, I know that you and yours think that they are toothless because of the way that they tactically handicap themselves, but I would remind you that they do still have a tech advantage over you, and an incredible advantage in numbers. On the other hand, they respect shrewd political maneuvering. They get angry for sure, and hate you when you beat them, but they will also respect you and will only listen to those they respect. That is a very important point when dealing with them, and is part of the secret of our limited success in keeping our rights to produce nutrient pace. The Penigra tangle with anyone when it suits their fancy. Remember, their favorite sport is politics, and they play it as a blood sport at that. If you start digging into their languages, looking for words like ally or opponent, you will find a labyrinthine mess of synonyms and antonyms, all of which seem very dependent on need of the moment. If you can gain their respect by playing the political game well enough, they might listen when you promise to leave them alone.
Hannibal worked his mind as fast as he could, worrying at the information he'd just been given. Henry ran his hand down his face and gave a dark chuckle.
So, we can't fight them, we can't convince them to lay off, and we can't cheat to stop them. Very well, our only option at this point looks like we mill through their tokens while holding the rest of the political situation together. Meanwhile, we have to convince them that, when the Exaltans are gone, we won't float our destroyers into their harbor and start firing blanks from our cannons to get their attention.
Hannibal shot Henry a heavily curious look and noticed that everyone else but Yoro did the same. Oh, some obscure historical reference, I am sure. Of course Yoro would understand. Henry chuckled and made a dismissive gesture.
Sorry, a story for another time, as is a plan to deal with Penigra. I am going to take everything you just gave me back to my intel boys, and have them dig deep into their culture. Find us something we can use to keep them at bay after we deal with these tokens of theirs, and try to see if they are playing some other sort of game. They have to realize that all they are doing is delaying the inevitable.
Golna spoke softly.
A lot can happen in 2 years of war.
Henry gave her a lopsided but hard smile.
True, but we have taken a lot of steps to see to it that it won't, and that leads us back to my promise to give you an update on military matters, and why humanity does not believe it is time to move to the second-to-last resort scenario of a war of conquest.
Henry cast a wry smile at Ingthel.
Would you like to do the honors?